Hi, welcome to the Invention Studio Metal Room. I'm Leah. I'll be showing you the metal checklist for today. Before we start, a few safety concerns. Make sure you have your safety glasses, tie back any long hair, and make sure any loose or dangling articles are removed and put somewhere that they're not going to get caught on anything before you start. Also, we have earplugs near the front of the door in case you're using anything particularly loud like the cold cut saw. And there's a first aid kit located behind me next to the shears. So to start with, we have our shears. We have 3 different types of shears. This one is a good straight cut, so if you're trying to do anything nice and clean, long cut, this is a good option for that. We've also got the Beverly shear, which is got a little bit of a curve to it, but it's very good for really quick prototyping cuts. So if you're just trying to knock something out and test with it, it's a good one to go to. And then this one can do right angles if you cut right in the middle. So that's good if you're doing any small straight cuts or a right angle cut. So we have 3 different types of shears here. We have the long, nice straight edge, which is good if you've got any long pieces you want to get a nice clean cut on. We've also got this one that will give you a right angle cut if you cut along the center there, or you can also use it for straight cuts just on the side. And then we also have the Beverly shear. It's got a little bit of a curve to the blade, but if you're just prototyping and you just want to get it out fast, it's a good one for that. We're going to use that one for today. So reach to the top and just pull down. Make sure you hold your piece against the shear while you cut, and there you have a nice clean cut. And then we can take that and sand it down. Next, we need to clean and deburr our edges. For the test, we would like you to use the belt sander to show that you can use it. However, there are 2 other options I'd also like to show you today. You can use a file or this deburring tool. The deburring tool, you want to go with the grain, pull away from yourself, and it should give you a nice clean edge. That's a good fast option if the belt sander is being used and you want to get your deburring done fast. The file, similar idea. You don't need to pull towards yourself, just push away. But for this test, I'd like to show you how to use the belt sander to show that you know how to use the belt sander, because it's one of the most useful and frankly most used tools in the studio. So to start with, there's this E-stop here. Twist the E-stop up to turn it on, and then you're going to want to press the run button to get it to start. So when you're using the belt sander, make sure you angle down with your piece, not up. If you angle up, it will try to catch on your piece, and that can cause safety issues because it'll basically try and grab your piece out of your hand. So again, make sure you're angling down. You can try and go straight, but if you're at all concerned that you won't be able to go straight on, make sure you've got a little bit of an angle down. So we're just going to turn this on. We're going to hold our piece up against the edge. We're going to flip to the other side. So now if you run your fingers over the edge of the piece, you're not going to get cut any. Make sure you do it lightly though. If you're just testing it, just don't want to nick yourself on it. Before we move over to the drill press, we're going to want to mark our holes using the center punch. The reason we do this is both to make sure that our holes on this plate are in the same placement as on this plate, as well as because when we drill on metal, typically the surface is smooth and slippery. So if you don't have it marked with a little bit of an indent first, the drill bit will try and move on you and you'll end up with it wandering or walking. So we've got 2 different types of center punches you can use. This is our spring-loaded center punch, and then we've also got these standard center punches, which you would use with a hammer. For the standard center punch, you're going to line it up. You're going to take a rubber mallet, hit the end, and make sure it leaves a nice mark. I don't have one that fits through this hole size though, so we're just going to use the spring-loaded instead. So we want to make sure that this is nice and center, and we want to make sure we hold it steady so that we don't have it move on us while we're making our holes. Push down and you'll hear it click. Do the same on the other hole and you're good to go. So now we're ready to move on to the drill press. Before we turn it on, there's a few things we need to do to set up. Make sure it's at the right height and make sure our metal is securely mounted before drilling. So this side, you take this handle, is what locks it. If I loosen this, then I can move this side to side. And then on this handle, if you ever need to raise or lower the plate, you use that. So turn it to my left, and it'll lower, and to my right, and it'll raise. Make sure you lock it before you drill, however. Raise that back up. And lock it. So for mounting, we have two options as well. We have this vise that we can use. Typically, if you have anything that's thinner steel or thicker or aluminum up to, say, 1/8 of an inch, though, if you put it in this vise, it'll tend to bend on you. Or for our anything that might bend on us, we want to take a wooden block, place our plate on that, take some clamps, and mount it to the base with those. Make sure you use 2 clamps. If you only use one, there's still a chance that your metal will slip and try and turn on you. So you always want 2 points of contact minimum. This is a little bit thicker than what we typically use for the test, so I'm going to use the vise. So we're going to line up our plate at the top of those parallels. Now that we have our piece set up, we can go ahead and put our drill bit in. We're going to come over and grab an 1/8 inch drill bit out of the drawer. You're going to want to check at the bottom if you can and read if it's an 1/8 inch drill bit. Sometimes they get misplaced, so if you can check, always helps just to make sure you have the right size. If you're ever unsure, it's best to make sure you go a size down rather than a size up, because you can always cut it bigger, but you can't cut it smaller. So before you put the drill bit in, make sure that your chuck isn't all the way open. If you try and stick it in there, you might get it caught in one of the sides. I've seen that happen before, and someone not notice, keep tightening and end up snapping the bit. If it flew in the opposite direction than it did fly, it probably would have hit them in the eye. So that's another reason you wear safety glasses, is in case you do something like that, you don't want to get hit by half of a drill bit. But in this case, we're going to make sure that we tighten the chuck just enough to slip our bit in, and no looser than that before we tighten it all the way. Make sure that you're just a little bit above where the threads start on your bit. You don't want to go right on the edge there. That's typically the spot where it's a little bit weaker, so if you try and tighten there, that's another way you can get a drill bit to snap. It's not usually a concern with your bigger drill bits, but 1/8 and lower, you're probably going to want to be extra careful to make sure you don't snap a bit by going on the threads or by tightening too soon while it's on the side. So we use the chuck key in one of these little holes to tighten it. Make sure you take your chuck key out and place it on the side of the drill. You don't want to leave that in the chuck. Once again, that's another thing that could fly at you if you leave it in the chuck, so that's another safety concern. Make sure you don't leave it in there. So next we want to try and line up our bit with our holes. If you're using the block of wood, you're going to have to loosen your base and adjust it that way. With the vise, however, you can typically move the vise itself, at least if you're doing anything not huge, because for that you're going to want it mounted. So try and get the tip of the bit lined up with your hole, and then make sure you raise it back up. Once again, we have our E-stop here. We're going to want to twist so that's no longer pushed down. If you ever have anything get caught and you need to stop the drill real fast, that's what you press. So lift that up, press this green on button, and then this is your speed control. For steel, about this thickness, you're going to want to go around 12 to 1400. For aluminum, typically go around anywhere from 18 and 2100 RPM. The RPM indicator is right up here. And you adjust that using this little dial. So we're going to turn it on. That should be about good. For this, I'm going to want to use a little coolant just because it might squeal. Pull it up and make sure you turn it off before you move anything at the base. You saw while I was drilling, I went up and down a little bit. Typically that's something you want to do, especially on anything thicker or harder metals. That makes sure that if you've got any little bits of metal stuck to your drill bit, it gets cleared out rather than just sticking up in there. Next, we're going to line up with the other hole. Get a bit of coolant on there. Nice clean cut. Make sure you go all the way through. One of the reasons you would use a block of wood if you're mounting directly to the base is to make sure that you can go all the way through without risking hitting the base of the drill press itself. Typically you'll see wood come up when you've gone all the way through. So next, make sure before you walk away from the drill press that you take your drill bit out and put it away. Put the chuck key away. And now we've got our nice clean holes and we're ready to move on to the next step. So now that we're done making our holes, we're going to move over behind our water jet to the sheet metal brake. If you ever need to adjust the height, you use these two handles. It typically should be set to the right height for the test, however, so shouldn't have to worry about that during your test. So to start with, we need to lift up the foot brake so that we can line our piece up. Try and line up the edges of your piece with the edge of this piece of metal here. If you're at all concerned about it, it will have a little bit of a radius, so it's better to move a little bit further back if you've got anything that goes on the inside than to move a little bit too far forwards. But you should be able to line up just about on that line there. Got to slam it down. And you take these handles and you pull up. Try and get to about 90 degrees. You probably need to go a little over 90 because metal tends to spring back a little bit. So just go a little bit at a time, and if you need to go a little bit over, you'll figure that out as you're doing it. It's always better to do a second bend than a little too far at first. Now that we have that bent side, we're going to need to move over to where there's a gap between the fingers. So you'll try and line up the side you bent with that gap. So we're going to go ahead and bend it there, and you'll see that piece we've already bent lines up in this crease, so we don't have to worry about it running into the machine. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same on the third side, and then we're going to move to this center finger for the last side. A little bit more. Now we've got our box. For our final step, we're going to come over and grab some rivets so we can rivet these two pieces together. Our rivets are located in the screws drawer in the bottom. We've got a bin labeled rivets. These three sections are all our 1/8 inch rivets. You can choose any length from those. Our rivet guns can be found over on this wall. You're going to grab one of the electric rivets, come over here and grab a battery. We're going to take out our two rivets. So for your rivet gun, it's pretty simple. You've got your nozzle where you put the rivet, and then this back part is a basically trash receptacle for the discarded pieces afterwards. Can typically empty that after you're done. So we're going to take our rivet and take this white part, and we want to make sure it goes through both holes in our metal. So we want to make sure that we can see it sticking out both ends. Hold your centerpiece in there, and then you're going to take your rivet gun and place it over this silver part. If you press this trigger, that should get it nice and stuck for you, and you'll see this silver part will break off. Typically it'll send it back into the back, but sometimes it doesn't. You can just take it out. So now you can see there's a rivet stuck on both sides. The way the rivet gun works is it basically compresses this little white compartment so that it expands out into your metal and holds it there with compression. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like outside of a piece of metal, just to demonstrate what that compression looks like. So we'll get our second one in there. So if you find after getting your first rivet in there that you can't get the second one through the hole, you might just need to widen one of your holes. The way you do that is you go over, you grab your drill bit again, and you just drill through one hole into the other one, and it should clear that up for you. So I'm going to go do that with mine. Typically, if you're not familiar enough with the drill to judge when you've gone all the way through, you're going to want a piece of wood underneath. I'm used to these tools enough that I can pretty usually tell once I've gone through, but when you're still getting used to drills, make sure you put a piece of wood underneath so you don't drill through the table. Now that fits pretty easy in there for us, and we can go ahead and rivet that second side, second hole. Now we've got our nice little flat rivet heads on one side, our little bits sticking out on the top, and we've got our complete box.